Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, Minister Irian and support staff, good evening. And after an adjournment for a technical reason, we're back, and I think the camera system is back up and running, so that means that we can continue. And I ask MP Christophe Emmanuel to pose his questions.
Madam Chair, I am still a bit troubled concerning this situation when it comes to the taxes. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister of Finance, so then what is the solution when it comes to places or entities such as Robbie's Lottery, when it comes to like Stars Casinos, in terms of having the possibility of banking their money? Because right now it's considered money laundering and they don't have a bank account, they can't bank their money. What is the solution? Because I'm still waiting for the banking law that was initiated here by a former member of Parliament. I believe it is here. I don't know what is going on with it. But Madam Chair, I mean, something got to give in terms of we giving businesses licenses and can't get a bank account. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister of Finance, what is your take on having a bank account possible for these entities, Madam Chair Lady?
Thank you, MP Christophe Emmanuel. Minister, there are some more questions, I think, and requests for clarification. So I'll continue with a round of MPs, and I ask MP Mercelina to direct his questions or comments.
President, thank you for the opportunity. Minister, thank you for the answers that you gave me, except for one answer that I did not understand. Minister, in an attempt that you made to give answer to one of my questions to understand better the budget of country Sint Maarten, to my concern is a very, very important matter for this country. You introduced all of a sudden a formula 2x4 that I didn't get, and then even you suggested to replace it for a formula 2x5 that made it more difficult for me to understand, seeing the fact that I do not have a financial background, but only a medical background. Can you please explain to me what you meant by introducing that formula, please? So I can understand better the answer to my question. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Mercelina. Minister, before I allow you to continue, I see that we also have MP Gums wishing to address some of the issues. MP Gums.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it was just more of a comment on the Minister's response regarding the status of the proposed sale of Winier. I ask it because it's in the budget. It's mentioned as a potential future amount. So that's why I asked what is the status, if it's in due diligence, etc. So it was more of a yes and no question. And I think, I'm not sure if because as soon as I heard that response to MP Emmanuel's question, I kind of got a little, as a former, trust industry employee from a governance perspective. So essentially what you're saying is that what I understand then from what the answer that the minister gave is that the illegal activities are wrong, but pay your share. We don't really care how you got it, but at the end of the day, the justice arm of government can still prosecute you in a way, because that's how it works, but that wasn't in your answer. So I think just to say that, to also clarify that you can pay and you can declare, but justice could still come after you no matter what. So just to make that clear for the public, do not money launder. Yeah. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gums. Minister, before I give you the floor to respond, I want to touch on the matter that MP Gums just touched on, and that is regarding Winier and sale of shares of Winier. You mentioned on 2 occasions in that context exploration, but for what seems to be still in the exploratory stage, this is a 13.4 million guilders in the budget as a revenue. One, that too, the due diligence would have to include a national ordinance allowing the government to sell shares. Vervreemden van aandelen is something that would have to be done by national ordinance. So I think to put a 13.4 million guilders revenue for a matter that is still in the exploratory stage, I think is sort of a risk where the income is concerned. You mentioned, Minister, that dividends of the central bank used to be paid, has been paid in the past, and it will commence again. And so my question to that response is, when last did the central bank pay dividends? And yes, when last did they pay dividend, and why have they then stopped for the last couple of years and not pay? Why? In the elucidation to the budget, it is mentioned dividend public companies. That's what it's mentioned in the English version of the elucidation. Dividend public companies, 30 million guilders. And in 2023 budget, in quoting the 2023 budget, the amount mentioned is 26 million guilders. If you look at the budget itself, the 26 million guilders is actually license fee and not dividend as in the elucidation. So we're going to have to be very clear what we are talking about, because in the same elucidation, it speaks about increasing the license fee that is collected on behalf of the countries by the central bank. So let us make it clear what we're talking about. There is no dividend public companies for the amount of 30 million guilders as is in the elucidation. So I don't know whether it's something lost in translation or not. And then allow me to make it clear that the reason why matters like the tourist tax have been mentioned, and my question regarding that about a 19 million guilders was because the members of parliament at the time were going from the budget that we received, which was the one before the corrections were made after the Council of Advice made its recommendations. Let me make that very clear. So it's not as if I pulled something out of the sky, but rather we were going by the budget that Parliament received at the time, which in the meantime, as explained to the members of Parliament, we have received the correct version of the budget. Minister, you indicated in response to my question about the participation of government in entities on page 113, to be specific, that is correct. Am I therefore to understand that no government entity has presented their annual report since 2019? Because that is what that page alludes to. So since that page is correct and actual, has none of these companies presented an annual report since the year 2019? And with respect to lottery income and the fact that the 2022 amount mentioned is on an accrued basis, so on the 2022, which should have the actual amount collected for, amongst other things, lottery fees, but it is mentioned the same 3,060,000 guilders, so we still don't know how much was collected in 2022, mind you, for lottery fees. Because what you have is the same 3,060,000 guilders like is budgeted in 2023 and again in 2024. How can we receive the amount collected in 2022 for sure and 2023, if possible, because that year is now closed, from lottery fees. Since the $3,060,000 that is across the line in this budget here for 2022 is an accrued amount. And Minister, if you can address those matters for me. So the winner, the page 113 participation, the lottery payments, and then this whole dividend and the central bank, why did they not pay for the past years, and the reference to public companies paying dividend. Minister, we have MP Grisha with a quick question, and I also see MP Lutmila following MP Heiliger. MP Grisha Heiliger, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I just have a broad technical question for us, the people, to understand. So the Chair Lady just mentioned earlier that the WINAIR, as you mentioned, is only at an exploratory phase. And that, and you also mentioned that, you know, the tax, okay, we haven't heard anything as yet, but the tourism tax is something that still has to come to Parliament. My question in general, just to understand, if we are to pass this budget now, does that mean that everything here is approved? That the WINAIR shares, that we are approving the WINAIR shares to be sold? Are we, okay, just I need to make that, if you can just put, just for clarity's sake, explain what it would mean for the public. For public consumption. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Heiliger Martin. MP De Wever, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good evening to everyone. Madam Chair Lady, during the break, I had the opportunity to sit with the Minister of Finance and his team to clarify the information that I required. And just as a sort of add-on to the question that I had related to the personnel overview or a summary of budget versus formation, is when I became aware of the fact that what I'm trying to understand in the budget is basically the total number of employees per formation compared to the total number of current or active employees that have been budgeted for, and then again compared to what they had at the end of the year in a complete year, whether that year it has been an audited year or just come to the end of the year and unaudited. So I asked, because the Minister of Finance is the one sitting here with us now, if they can then in turn pass on the explanation to the ministries, considering it is really just one question I am asking that contains various numbers in it. Because right now I've received 3 numbers, but everyone is using different numbers and not comparing it to the formation or the function book. So right now, the SGF Finance has prepared the information the exact way that I need it. And this is the reason that I'm asking for it, because if part of the requirement of civil servants, right, when we're talking all the time about capacity issues, is related to what we have in the function books and is related to what we can actually afford to have in terms of staff, then, and if it's also related to legislative changes needed, then I need to have an understanding of what we need so that you can support the government. And I don't have that. It's just one question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP De Wever. Minister, that is it from the side of members of Parliament, and I ask you if you can immediately go into the answering of these questions, or you require some time. Sorry, Minister?
Yes, Madam Chair, we could answer some.
Okay, some of them,
Yes.
and
then the rest in writing, if necessary.
well, what you will have to do, Minister, is to the question, be specific about those that you
Yes.
can and will respond to in writing, and then the members of Parliament will indicate whether they agree with that, and if they do, then they will be included in the overall written answers. So, Minister, but are you ready to go
Yes.
into some of them now?
Yes.
Then I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the first question from MP Christophe Emmanuel regarding a current solution, as I mentioned before, the initiative banking law, I don't know if I mentioned here, I know we had a discussion about it. We do have a banking law that we submitted already. It has been in Parliament from the Ministry of Finance through the Central Bank. It has been in Parliament already since January, which is makes it easier for a person to get a bank account. It's called a basic bank account law. It's already at Parliament already. And the next question was, I also will share a document. I did share it in our MP chat. I will also officially email it to Garrick as part of the report regarding the laws. And going into, that leads me into MP Gum's comments regarding the taxation on criminal activities. Yes, it doesn't mean that you won't be persecuted by the law. You still have to, as you mentioned, don't money launder, don't have any criminal activities, but the law will tax you if you do. And maybe I use the wrong words in terms of the veneer, MP Gums, in terms of exploration, because we are still exploring the possibilities in terms of the entities that are now part of the discussion. But I would say it's more along the lines of closer to due diligence. We've hired in an entity to deal with, we've done already in 2020 the first evaluation of the company. Now we're doing a second one. We have an entity that's now working on the different agreements, looking at parties, dealing with veneer. We do have the support of veneer's board and management for this also. I want to make that also clear. And that also leads me into the question from MP Helga Martin regarding the budget. So you mentioned the tourist tax and veneer sales. The approval of a budget allows us to use the money. So let's say the sale happens, because you don't have it budgeted, you can accept the money, but you can't execute anything because you haven't budgeted for it. And that's why over the years, for example, we've even included monies that we've gotten, for example, from the trust fund. So if you look at prior years, trust fund income wasn't registered in the budget, but it was executed on behalf of government. So even though we have even though it's an in and out, so it doesn't come on our account, but we register it. So that's on why these items are in the budget. And then we have MP Marcelina regarding his question on, as I mentioned in the questions, MP Marcelina continued to mention in almost all of his questions on the outgoing government. And then the question was, what advice would the outgoing government have for the incoming government? And the answer then was, I'll break down my answer then, was if the incoming government needs support from the outgoing government, in particular the National Alliance faction, we are willing to support by helping support your coalition. That's what I mentioned. So going from 2x4 to 2x5. So that's to be very, very clear. Next was MP. Yes, I partially answered the question on the shares of veneer and the word exploratory. So I kind of clarified that. But MP Westcott Williams, some of your other answers. The last time we got dividend from the central bank was 600,000 guilders in 2019. The dividend stopped because no profit was made since then. Okay, so and I think we have 3 more questions from you, MP, which I want to be very clear on. So those I prefer to either come back or put them in writing. The last 2 questions that you had.
Thank you.
So those questions were about the lottery, the 2019 entities. Yes.
Thank you, Minister, but you did not respond to, in the process of exploring or doing due diligence for veneer, when do you and how do you consider bringing this matter seeking approval from Parliament?
As you mentioned, when that would eventually have to come through ordinance also, but the process can start before. We're not going to go. You can't get to that point if there's no potential sale. So I don't know the chicken and egg situation, but we have to seek interest first. We have to start the process. We have to do evaluation. So we are taking all the necessary steps. We need support and approval, support by the board and management. And then you also need interest of other parties. So that process has started, and the other steps can also start simultaneously.
Do you have a plan? A plan for the steps to be taken, and do you have a plan?
Yeah, so
a plan of approach?
Yes, we do have a plan. As I mentioned, we are working with a third-party entity that is working with us on this plan, yes.
I see that, thank you, Minister. I see that MP Emmanuel has a point to address. MP Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just for clarity's sake, I heard the Honourable Minister said that the initiative banking law from the central bank, is that the former Member of Parliament, Rolando Bryson's initiative banking law? Or this, because now is it two banking laws or one banking law? Which one is it? Because I know the former member came with an initiative banking law. In addition to that, which one of your colleagues would you be kicking out? Because the reference of 2x4, meaning that the coalition is 2 members each of 4 political parties. So if you make mention that they can probably get assistance to make it 2x5, are you saying that you're kicking out the Prime Minister and Minister Duran, and you and the Member of Parliament, Marlin, would be joining or willing to help the coalition to make it 2x5, just for clarity's sake? Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Apparently your question is considered a good question, so I'll ask the Minister to address it, please.
Just for clarity, I didn't mention that was a good question. So I think we have different math here. So our math's in Matin, as the young people that say, but and regarding the initiative law, so I'm not too sure on the law of MP Bryson. I do know that I think it did go to Council of Advice, and I'm also an MP now also. So there is reports here that we could see on the response from the Council of Advice there. What we have is a initiative brought by, and I'll say this I can say, the concerns by the MP. Right, the MP did bring concerns over the last few years. He was an advocate for the banking law, so I'm not going to take that away from him. But his concerns we did bring to the central bank. It wasn't a high interest for them in the beginning, but we did put pressure on them to start this process, and the central bank did do it. So the central bank did write this law, and I also had my own staff also work on this law also from cabinet and organization, and we submitted the law in January.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister of Finance. Members of Parliament, are there any other items you wish to bring up to the Minister of Finance before we close off the session with him? Have the answers been adequately provided, except for the ones that we are still to receive in writing? If that is okay with the members of Parliament, then I can thank the Minister and his support staff for their answering here tonight, their presentation as well. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes, and we can then go over to the next minister who will come in to respond to questions. Meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the continuation of the Central Committee meeting number 15. And in this committee meeting, in the Central Committee meeting, we're handling the draft budget 2024. During these sessions, ministers are responding to questions posed by members of Parliament. And we now have the Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, who will respond to the questions posed regarding her ministry. Minister of General Affairs, Ms. Silvera Jacobs, you have the floor.
Good evening to you, Madam Chair, Secretary General, members of Parliament, those following this broadcast, as well as, of course, all the support staff of both government and Parliament that are also behind the scenes, diligently working. Thank you for your dedication and your patience. I have come this evening to address the questions as posed in yesterday's meeting. I will start with the question of MP Arundel, whose first question related to the policy projects for 2024, asking what are some of them, including internal and foreign affairs and disaster management. I believe this question was already answered in my initial presentation, and the details of these can be found in the budget elucidations, but I can elaborate specifically on the disaster management aspect for 2024 key priorities under disaster management, in that the Office itself of Disaster Management, Early Warning Systems for Sint Maarten, fostering resilient crisis management are priorities. In addition to such, implementation of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and aspects of disaster management key for policy development are the Knowledge Center, Crisis Information Management, Operations, and Procedures for Disaster Management, and particularly for the EOC. Significant for disaster management is also the function book of the Fire Department, which I also mentioned yesterday in my presentation, which is relevant for the acquiring of the staff needed to man the Office of Disaster Management as well. With such an office, disaster management becomes a key endeavor of the government, for the government of Sint Maarten. And from a regional and kingdom perspective, regional coordination is being fine-tuned to support crisis coordination, relief aid, and donor coordination. This also includes mapping of relevant stakeholders for prioritization of response. So that is across the board. His second question was, what training and digital skills development has the ministry focused on to improve the operations and service? This was also mentioned during the presentation. However, I'll repeat for the record, the personnel department plans to organize trainings for the organization in areas such as communication, middle management, project management, the HR cycle, team building, policy writing, advice writing, legislative writing, and data analysis. In addition, the Digital Government Transformation Project, DGTP, which is funded via the Trust Fund, but also receives some funding and support via the reform measures, as well as operational budget, has dedicated activities focused on training and the improvement of digital skills within the organization. The assessment of the training needs was done to determine the types of proficiency modules needed for the training. This trajectory is still ongoing, hopefully to be rolled out during 2024. Third question, what type of vehicle, hardware, and facility upgrades are planned under the capital expenditures budget? The government of Sint Maarten was not able to invest in its ICT hardware of the organization since 2017. There are many PCs, so personal computers, that have reached the end of their lifespan and do not function properly, requiring constant support, which is costing excessive man-hours. Currently, the PCs in the organization range from 3 to 8 years old. The direction the government has chosen to go in, being more digital, requires that the PCs be able to function with new technology and requires that they contain certain specifications to handle the new technology. As new technology continues to evolve, government needs to evolve with it. Regarding the vehicles, according to the vehicle policy, the car fleet is replaced every 5 years. As such, and in accordance with the policy, the necessary service vehicles allowing key and frontline personnel to execute their jobs must be purchased. I go to the question of Member of Parliament De Weaver, who asked for an overview, as she just elucidated a while ago. We will await the update from the Ministry of Finance to update ours, which we had also already sent on, to ensure it meets the requirements of the question. Also, a question was asked on information, more information on the HR management systems. In response to that, the HR management system, HRM, is a custom-developed system on Microsoft Development Platform, the one we are currently using. There is an initiative to transition to an off-the-shelf solution in MS Dynamics HR, which provides a more complete HR system with functionality that best complements the needs of the P&O department. I go to the questions of MP Helga Martin. I must mention, however, that in the list that was provided, some of the questions that were falling under general affairs actually do not resort on the general affairs. So, especially related to the resilience building report, I did ask for some clarity as to that report, and once I'd received it, it was clear that this was one that refers to the Ministry of TEAT. And so I believe if the answers have not yet been provided by the Ministry of TEAT, that we can ensure that they receive them to be able to do so in writing if necessary. So that relates to the questions. I will need to scroll, give me a minute, a second or two. The questions 58 to 68 that were in your submitted questions, Madam Chair, to the Member of Parliament. Those questions will be forwarded to the Ministry of TEAT. The questions 69 to 70, A through M, are related to GEBE, and I would prefer, Madam Chair, if we could submit those either in writing or continue with those questions as they relate to the questions that we have had in the meeting on GEBE. So I do not have the answers to those questions at this moment. That is 69 to 70, A through M. So if the Member of Parliament would want to receive them in writing before the public meeting, excuse me, Madam Chair, through you, that would be possible. And the questions. So there was a discrepancy in what was sent and what was sent via the Secretariat. So I apologize to the Member of Parliament. So they came in a bit later to me, the ones that you sent directly. They weren't sent in the general list of questions to General Affairs. So also the ones on corporate governance, if we could submit those in writing, I'd appreciate it. Let me go back up. The question that I did receive an answer for, MP, was 58 on the, I don't think it was 58, the current status 68 of the St. Maarten membership to CARICOM. Given the complexities of the envisioned associate membership and budgetary constraints of the past especially, there was a delay in our membership trajectory. We are now in the final stages, I think I've mentioned this late last year as well, of negotiating the agreement with CARICOM, and there's even a stronger cooperation with Aruba and Curacao and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to mitigate further delays and ensure that the legal alignment, despite the individual agreements that will have to exist between CARICOM and the three countries. So we are in the final stages. However, I must note that there is no current budget allotment for that at this stage. MP Roseberg didn't have questions. MP Emmanuel had a question or a GB issue regarding the hack and the statements that were made. I don't necessarily need to repeat. Indeed, I am reading from the information that, as Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, I received from the government-owned company, of which we are shareholders. I would like to thank the Member of Parliament for his concern, as it is something that I will surely investigate further, considering that we are in the handling of the budget. I would like to reserve the right to provide an in-depth response during the continuation of the GB meeting. What I can say, though, is that I did a bit of research on the word breach, as was mentioned in my response, and hack. In cybersecurity, indeed, a breach, and I quote, occurs when data that is unintentionally left vulnerable in an unsecured environment is viewed by someone who shouldn't have access to that data, while hacks are the result of malicious behavior. Breaches happen because of negligence, human error, or other non-malicious behavior that creates a security vulnerability, unquote. In my reporting on this matter, due to the fact that no data was lost, I would say that the terms used are incorrect for the cybersecurity field. So the walls of their security was breached, and I believe that is the reason it was stated that way. What I can mention is that there is concern by the company as well as by me, and I would expect members of Parliament also should be concerned about the leak of confidential information, which I will surely go into in more depth once we get into the questions or the direct questions that were asked pertaining to this topic. But I think we must understand sometimes that confidential information put forth in the public in a manner in which it was put forth can be actually detrimental to the company if taken out of context. At the end of the day, I believe we both drew the same conclusion that the data was not lost, as it was in the previous hack. Clearly, I for sure will ensure I'm using the right terms when reporting here on the floor of Parliament. So indeed, what this occurrence was cannot be termed a breach, but indeed an unsuccessful hack. The following question from the MP mentions genocide, that we, St. Maarten, are part of genocide, based on the fact that, as he states, the Kingdom of the Netherlands is #1 European country supplying Israel with arms and taking part in the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza and Palestine. When The member asks, Madam Chair, if when I fly to the UN and go to all those places and sit around the table and see the name of Israel, how I feel. And if I would take the same stance as Curacao did when they told the kingdom not to put Curacao in their discussions as part of the kingdom when conducting these sort of atrocities, unquote. Madam Chair, I believe it's important to clarify, after, of course, having done a check, that the Kingdom of the Netherlands is not the number one European country supplying arms to Israel. In fact, in keeping with the UN experts who have determined that any transfer of weapons or ammunition to Israel that would be used in Gaza is likely to violate international humanitarian law and must cease immediately. This has been, in fact, reiterated several times during the last 2 treks to the United Nations. A Dutch appeals court ordered the Netherlands on February 12th to halt the export of F-35 fighter jets. Sorry, let me go back. To halt the export of F-35 fighter jet parts to Israel. The US-owned F-35 parts are stored at a military base warehouse in the Netherlands and then shipped to other countries. So to be clear, these items are not the Netherlands, or are they manufactured in the Netherlands? As it relates to the stance taken by Curacao, this was not a stance by the government of Curacao, but a motion presented by a member of parliament during the budget debates 2024, which the government forwarded on to the Netherlands and all other parliaments and governments in the kingdom as per the instruction of the motion. The motion referenced the statute, Article 3, on foreign affairs, and the need for consultation on positions taken in the name of the kingdom. It is also calling on increased coordination between the kingdom partners, particularly on any issue that relates to us, and particularly also in this case on Gaza. And this is a sentiment that we in St. Maarten wholeheartedly support. As it relates to the position that the kingdom took in the ongoing conflict, indeed, this was one of the cases in which the countries were not consulted prior to the statement being made. It is important to note that legally, we as countries must be consulted on issues of foreign affairs that directly impact us. As such, not all decisions are weighed in on by the countries. The position taken by the kingdom was queried by our Department of Foreign Affairs with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in The Hague. And I alluded to this in a presentation to Parliament as one of the examples of the democratic deficit when it was done here, or it was alluded to by them as an example. I wasn't in that one, sorry. At the same time, there is a desire by us as countries to be consulted on and weigh in on all, or at least, the very least, the most significant foreign affairs matters matched. And of course, we feel that because this could be more than what we are actually handling, that there should be an increased capacity within the Department of Foreign Affairs. As a matter of fact, I have seen an increasing need to ensure that there is much more structural engagement with the Foreign Affairs Department and ensuring that we have a foreign policy that encompasses all ministries. This will make our actions as a government much more effective. It will assist us in being able to access much more funding and much more technical support. I hope, Madam Chair, that clarifies. the statements made. Again, it is interesting to make statements on the floor of Parliament, but we must always ensure that we are being as factual as possible and not just saying things for shock value. There are questions also from MP Marlin. What are the risks involved in not approving this budget? Which key investments and/or new hires, projects, and programs will be impacted? Any and all projects and initiatives that were slated to commence with the adoption of this budget will not be able to materialize. Additionally, projects that have already commenced in 2023 but need further implementation and funding in 2024 would also have to be halted. This would include some of our very key digitalization projects, the projects that are, some that are related to some of the reforms. So some come from our own budget, some come from the budget of the Dutch government via the TWO, which is also highlighted within our budget as well. So key reforms would be impacted if we're not able to realize this, of course, and any hires that were not budgeted in 2023 would not be able to move forward as well. We would then have to book, the regular operational matters could also be jeopardized, as legally we would only be able to spend based on a premise of what was executed in operations that could be covered by the 2023 budget. We would have to book unnecessary overtures and would risk an unraising, as we are already late with the submission of this budget. So those are the risks involved. The question was also asked whether the 2% COLA would be impacted, and if approved, if it would be retroactive to January 2024. Indeed, without an approved budget, there would be no legal budgetary instrument to pay out the 2% COLA. Additionally, it would put us in a very precarious position with the unions with whom we have signed a covenant. And I would also like to remind the MP that this COLA increase is also way overdue, and considering the economic and financial constraints we are all facing, giving our people, our civil servants, a little something extra in their hands would mean increasing their buying power, which I believe has been championed here on the floor of Parliament by all concerned. The concept national decree necessary for the 2% COLA increase, once approved, will go into effect retroactive to January 2024, as we have agreed. The MP asked, seemed interested in the 32-hour work week, as was piloted by the Minister of Finance, and asked whether we have any other plans for the whole ministry and or government. This is already possible, although not organizational, not used widely by the staff throughout the organization. The intention is to await the results of the pilot, as was explained by Minister of Finance, coupled with the to-be-revised working from home, working hybrid policy, which we had been employing since returning to the offices after the COVID shutdown, to determine the best way forward and to ensure that we can measure productivity as well. There's another question. Oh yes, now we go to the questions of MP Westcott. Williams, is the draft law to increase vacation allowance already in the making? If not, when? Currently it's at 6%. Where are we now with the legislation for this increase? During my initial presentation, I updated that the legislative process has commenced. In fact, the draft legislation was approved in the Council of Ministers on March 5th and sent on to the Council of Advice for vetting. The MP further asks about the plans for the NRPB. Reference was made to the NRPB 2.0 and whether any information on this vision can be shared. I do have some correspondence that I would be able to share with the MP in writing related to this, but indeed, I can mention here that the 2.0 does not reference any further extension of the trust fund. It's already been extended to 2028. This relates to the future of the NRPB and utilizing the built-up capacity to continue to serve government as a program or project bureau to be able to execute projects and or programs using other funding, such as development funding, which we have started to have discussions with the Ministry of Basic Care about the SDE Plus, the Growth Fund, and other options, including capital expenditures that we could receive in the future. I must mention that, excuse me, I must also mention that in the discussions that we've had with the United Nations and other international agencies and the development of the multidimensional vulnerability index to be able to gauge in middle-income countries as well as others the possibility for us to receive concessionary financing. As you know, St. Maarten, because of our special circumstances, don't qualify for certain funding. But with this new index being discussed seriously at the United Nations and being supported heavily by the Secretary General of the United Nations and others, including the United Nations department that looks out for least developed, landlocked, and small island developing states, seeing this as very important measuring tool to determine who can get the funds, because one of the biggest challenges, especially in climate change and climate action, adaptation, etc., is that the funds that are put forward are not trickling down to the most vulnerable. So with this index, we're hoping that we can show, especially we as small islands that have middle income but are very vulnerable to the external shocks on a yearly basis, that we could be able to access it, and, you know, having persons who can actually execute and maybe even further serve that, not just for Sint Maarten, but for the region once we build up, continue to build the expertise, would be good, because as the trust fund goes down, you will have less need for the quantity of people, and we wouldn't want to lose that expertise built up here on Sint Maarten. But I would be able to share the vision and the research or the thought process that has been developed thus far for the future of the program and project bureau for Sint Maarten. This can be submitted along with the report. The question related to the General Audit Chamber and the pension fund, I believe, was handled by the Minister of Finance. And then the fourth question by the Member of Parliament, Westcott Williams, was related to the lack of repairs to the booths at the Jocelyn Arndale Village. In the explanation provided by the Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, it was stated that the second bidding was unsuccessful, and the MP would like to get a better explanation as to why this couldn't happen, why it did not take place, why the booths could not be repaired, why it didn't go well, if it can be better explained. Indeed, MP, a better explanation is needed. The initial public bidding did not proceed as planned. A tender process should ideally uphold the principles of transparency and diligence. Following advice received from our legal counsel, the ministry identified several inconsistencies in the first public bidding process. Consequently, the ministry deemed it necessary to conduct another public tender to ensure transparency and objectivity. The second public tender has been completed, so I must mention here that in speaking, I believe it was in a press briefing, that I misspoke in terms of overlooking part of the statement that I made. So it wasn't that the bid was unsuccessful. What was unsuccessful was, despite efforts to complete the tender before the deadline, the bid to repair the festival village before this carnival season was unsuccessful. So I missed out a whole chunk of that sentence stating that the bid itself was unsuccessful. So I apologize for misspeaking during that public session of the press briefing. and we'll ensure that a proper retraction is printed as well. So the bid was successful, however, not in time to finish before Carnival, and is scheduled to start once the festivities have ended. MP Westcott Williams further asks why the budget of the VKS decreased, and over the past 2 years, the VKS actual expenditures have decreased to nearly half of the recorded budget of 2024. As such, the budgeted amount has been put more in line with the actual expenditures while maintaining sufficient budget to sustain any additional expenses that should arise related to the services of the VKS. Yes, indeed. I see that, Madam Chair, can I have 2 minutes to check 2 questions that I may have missed from MP Roseberg?
Surely you may. Just let me, and I'll adjourn so that, yes, the meeting will be adjourned. Adjourned for 2 minutes. We continue with the meeting, and the Prime Minister, as Minister of General Affairs, is responding to questions by members of Parliament. Prime Minister, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, I did miss 2 questions from MP Roseberg. One of them is, over the years, the communication budget has been underestimated. Is the voice over IP system now fully in operation to potentially reduce telephone costs? Indeed, we have been reducing costs over the years. The voice over IP system is used for all government buildings, so we can connect with even the ones that are outside of the building via that system. Well, we will continue to, with our ongoing digitalization process, ensure that we become even more cost efficient. As it relates to the electricity budget, this has been underestimated as well. Has the facility management developed a plan to address the high energy prices? I think, especially in the last budget presentation, we highlighted that these are areas that we are working diligently on. And so the B10 measure also aims to address the 20% reduction of housing costs. So this includes electricity and other utilities. So that is something being worked out. And we are also busy with I think we've mentioned that before, a change management plan to reduce or increase efficiencies in general in how the government's coffers are expended in terms of facility services. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister Silveria Jacobs. We now go over to the members of Parliament who wish to ask or get a matter clarified. And the first one, the first MP is MP Roseburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Thank you for answering the questions, Madam Prime Minister. I do have a question, additional questions too. Does GB has a hindrance permit? And which government-owned companies have a hindrance permit and which do not? So specifically on GB, and then which government-owned companies have one and which do not. The second question is, in 2021, in August, Grid Market Sint Maarten and Island Resilience Partnership announced a public-private partnership dedicated to helping Sint Maarten transition to clean, resilient, and affordable energy. There was an MOU where Sint Maarten agreed to work with Grid Market and IRP. What is Grid Market's role currently now that GB has hired a new consultant company, Energy Nautics, for advice on renewable energy? And why has GB chosen another consultancy company while there is one already? So those are the two questions to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roseburg, and I now continue with MP Christophe Emmanuel. MP Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I never said that Holland or the Netherlands is the world's leading or the #1 supporter of arms. I said European, the #1 European country, Madam Chair. That's what I said, European. And Madam Chair, it says here in the EU Observer, meanwhile, according to the latest EU figures on the subject, consulted by the EU Observer, France, Romania, the Czech Republic, Italy, and the Netherlands were also the top exporters of weapons to Israel. Germany, France, and the Netherlands and Portugal granted Israel export license in the tune of 23 billion euros of bombs, torpedoes, rockets, missiles. The EU said, Israel can't fight this war without Western missiles and artillery shells. Robert Barr, a U.S. expert on Middle East security, previously told the EU Observer. Madam Chair, what I'm saying, if you go down and now you look at it in percentage, Holland is on top. But those countries in Europe, not the world, in Europe are the #1 exporters to weapons to Israel, and the Netherlands top that list, Madam Chair. So when you want to come with facts, find your facts good. Because here in Parliament, we're going to fact check you. Because it's good for you to sit on one side and say, oh, you want to say this because now in your facts, you get your facts too as well. And if there's a deficit in comprehension, that's not on my part, Madam Chair. But I didn't say in the world. I said in Europe, the #1 country in Europe. Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Christophe Emmanuel. I just want to ask Prime Minister, just to be clear, because the Minister of Finance, when attempting to answer the question, but then he did say leave it up to the Prime Minister, the vacation allowance, the legislation is on its way to the Council of Advice, and that is the draft national ordinance. That's ordinance. I just want to confirm that that's what it is. The vacation amount is being changed by LBHAM?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's the ordinance for the bezoldigingsregeling, that's separate, and the one for the vacation is a LBHAM, national decree with general measures.
Okay. That's something too I'll get back to, but just wanted to understand what you meant when you said the legislation is on its way. General decree is also legislation, but I wanted to know which piece of legislation, kind of legislation that is that you were referring to. So you have clarified that. And let me see if there's any other clarification I needed from you, Prime Minister. Oh, in the budget, the amount of the cost of depreciation has been increased to 13 million guilders now, actually, and a reference was made to material from NRPB. Is that depreciation on the cars that were gotten via NRPB, or is it something else that increased the cost of depreciation, overall speaking, to 13 million? And if it is the cars, are the ministers still in possession of those cars that will eventually go to whatever service they were meant for? And if they are still, if the ministers are still in possession of those cars, have now that there was the budget for such in 2023, have the cars for the ministers themselves, have those been ordered? Are they, what is the situation with the exchange of cars? So if those two questions can be clarified, in fact, the one on the legislation has been clarified, and that would be it from my side, Prime Minister, and I ask if you will immediately go into the questions posed. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If I start with you first, seeing as we're not that fast in writing and I will be able to remember that one. Indeed, the depreciation, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly, but I know they've done a proper assessment of all the assets. So I think I heard Minister Finance while I was in the other room explaining that even trust fund purchased materials had to be put on the budget. And the reason for that is it had to show up as an asset afterwards. So all of these materials, which were not just cars, but the fire trucks, the ambulances, what do you call those things? Heavy equipment on the landfill, all of those were added as assets, and the depreciation of all of government's assets therefore would have added up. It would have increased, more things would have to be taken along. So I do believe it played a role, but not necessarily, I can't say off the top of my head, maybe with the Ministry of Finance and Facility Services, we would be able to get a more accurate description, hopefully, that we could submit in writing. As it relates to the vehicles, definitely the cars that were being used by ministers are definitely more than the 5 years old, and we are experiencing a lot of problems with it. So some ministers have been borrowing cars determined for the ministry, and once the new cars are ordered, then those would go back to the ministry, is the expectation. Does that cover your cars question?
Yes, so the cars have not yet been ordered, am I to understand?
The advice is being finalized as far as I know. Yes, it's not yet through to the Council of Ministers, but the tender procedure has happened. Yes, the tender procedure has happened, but the advice has not yet come up to the minister's desk. It's on its way.
Okay. Thank you for that, Prime Minister, and you may continue because you referred to
Yes.
my question first.
Yes, and the question of MP Roseberg, the questions on the hindrance permits, if you would permit us to submit that in writing, I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. For GEBE and any other government-owned company, we can promise to send that in writing. As it relates to grid market, that is definitely one of the, so you see you get funding, you get assistance. We did get necessary assistance to be able to move forward after having had our staff take part in several conferences related to climate change, et cetera, and what we could do as small islands. So we did get some research funding, which we then procured Grid Market to carry out the research together with Island Resilience to assist St. Maarten with our transition to renewable energy. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, but you were not here through you, Madam Chair, So I can update that, especially for the new members, that this is government's roadmap in which we have a energy policy work group, which includes GEBE, but over the years, the communication with GEBE has not been optimal. It's only in the last couple of years with the new management again that we are able to get more collaboration, but because GEBE, in the situation where they were, needed to revamp their complete strategic plan, and that was part of the trust fund project from the onset, however, not followed up on by previous management. This management decided to make use of that opportunity to get a full-fledged grid assessment done to be able to better mesh with what was already done. So what we had did not include the proper grid assessment of NVGB, and now that is also going to be taken along, but at the end of the day, the company has to do their due diligence and are doing that at this time. The grid market roadmap, or Sint Maarten's roadmap, which was done by Grid Market, presented a proposal of a phased approach with various types of alternative energy sources and projections. So as long as we would still need to know whether it would be able to connect to the grid, what would be needed for storage, et cetera, based on the real numbers. And that was actually missing and is necessary for us to proceed as government and NVGB. And to clarify, in my response to the Member of Parliament, Emmanuel, I was a little bit confused because at no point did I say anything about the world. And I quote, I said, the Netherlands is not the #1 European country supplying arms to Israel. And as a matter of fact, as part of United Nations, has to uphold the agreements made there that no arms would be sent, and that the United Nations also agreed with the case that I mentioned, that the appeals court ordered the Netherlands to halt even the very export of parts for jets. Parts for the jets that were passing through the Netherlands. Yeah? So I am in no way condoning anything they may have done prior to that, but at this point, that is not the case.
Is there anything else?
I believe, Madam Chair, those were the only clarification and new questions. You had a new question?
Ms. MP La Cruz, you have a question for the Prime Minister?
Good evening, Prime Minister. I think you missed my questions. All. 2 questions I ask all ministers. So the first one was what has it cost the country? What are we paying in court cases? How much we've lost, how much we've won? And the next question was, what would you urge the new Prime Minister? Which projects are you busy with now that you would urge the new Prime Minister to continue working on?
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, and my apologies through you to MP La Cruz for missing those 2 questions. The first question, seeing that is one that I would have to go and dig for. I would prefer to submit that in writing to not hold up the process here this evening. But as it relates to advice, I believe throughout my presentations I've highlighted the ongoing matters and projects, programs. There is a lot going on in the Ministry of General Affairs. A lot of the change that has been lobbied for during the election campaign is underway. So I would hope that that change would continue to improve. We are working diligently on many of the measures to improve efficiency in government, the digitalization, as well as the improvements to the human resource management. A lot of the questions actually did come in that area. Those are very, very important. And of course, I would of course want to finalize the agreements with BZK related to accessing those funds, the SDE Plus and the growth funds and others, which are in process, and with the State Secretary visiting next week, I'll find out whether or not the process is ready to be finalized, and if not, then the next Prime Minister would have to take that up and finalize that as well, because that is only to ensure the continuity of progress for the country. So a lot has been done with the capital expenditures that need to be finalized, continued improvement, and the administration is there to ensure that the priorities of the ministry are highlighted. And we did also promise, as mentioned before, that these would be highlighted in a transition document, so that will be evident once it is received, and through the budget as well, which I hope will receive the approval of this Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your responses. Members of Parliament, are there any other matters that you wish to address in this session with the Minister of General Affairs? That is not the case. Prime Minister, then I want to thank you and your support staff for providing the answers to members of Parliament. We look forward to receiving some of the documentation that you refer to, along with the written responses from the Minister, the Ministry of General Affairs. Thank you, Prime Minister, and I adjourn for 5 minutes to allow the Minister of Justice, who I think is here, and we will, yes, so let me adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you, Minister. We're going back, members. Good evening, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen. We are now at the last minister to present the answers to questions posed by the members of parliament here in the Central Committee meeting of Parliament, Central Committee meeting number 15. We have with us the Minister of Justice, who is going to continue the process of providing answers as was done by all ministers before the Minister of Justice. Minister of Justice is the last one to present her answers to Parliament, and then we can round off our Central Committee meeting on the draft budget 2024. So, Minister, welcome to you and your support staff, and I invite you to immediately go into the responding to questions posed by members of Parliament. Before you do so, however, members of Parliament, you just unofficial, and I say unofficial because it's not yet registered with a number, but you have just received the presentation of the answers that the Minister of Justice will be providing. Because that is the case, Minister, I would want to suggest that, for example, where you have the graphs and such in your presentation, it can just be referred to. So you don't have to run down the numbers that are on the slides for the members to see. And so I would suggest as you go down your answers, you just take that into consideration. Members, you have it on your, in the chat of Parliament, okay? So you just, yes, Minister, you can refer to, whatever drafts and overviews that you have, just refer to the members of Parliament in responding. So with that, Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. A pleasant good evening to you, as well as to the members of Parliament, those, our SGs, support staff, those who are here with us in the Tribune, and of course, who's tuned in online or via radio. I would hope my senior citizens are resting at this hour, so they're not up at this time. Nevertheless, let me see if I can go through this as quickly as possible, considering the time. The first question is being addressed, that was presented by MP De Weaver. Please provide an overview of employee movement from 2020 until 2023. Information should be presented for the following years. And she lists 2022-2023. Please see the table below of what the data that is being requested. And we tried our best to be able to provide this information as much as possible. The graphs are on the screen and before you. As the chair lady has asked, we're not going to go into the details because it's there for MPs to be able to peruse. I'll move on to the next slide. This also gives the FTA breakdown, vacancies budgeted for FTAs. There is one aspect that, There is one aspect that MP De Weaver is asking for as well, and that has to do with how many persons have, let's say, resigned versus those hired. We are busy still compiling that information and respectfully would like to present that information to MP De Weaver as per her chart provided, but I'd just like her to know that that is forthcoming. Madam Chair Lady, through you, well, I just addressed that part. Then we're moving on to MP Mingret. The Ministry of Justice and VROMI, what are the plans to mitigate the traffic jams? Please organize your answers by short, medium, and long-term goals. If there are plans, are they reflected in the budget? The reality is that for a small island like ours, the number of vehicles continue to increase steadily. Presently, there are no regulations in place limiting the number of vehicles permitted on the island relative to our geographical size. Addressing this issue requires thorough examination and collaboration between the Ministry of Justice, VROMI, and other stakeholders. At this juncture, we lack concrete information to provide specific details in response to your inquiry. Both the Ministry of Justice and VROMI need additional time to conduct a comprehensive analysis and engage in dialogue between the relevant ministries. Consequently, we are unable to provide a response to your question at this time. Was the option of stoplights in school districts considered as a solution as opposed to the use of traffic police officers? If not, why? This matter requires more dialogue between the respective ministries. As such, a response to the question posed at this time is not possible. Can Justice please expand on the Radix immigration software project as it makes a significant part of the CapEx? Radix is a border management system introduced to administer passenger clearances and security checks for the Immigration and Border Protection Services. The option for choosing Gamma IT as Radix system is a direct result of minimal improvements received to the present stichting, which is SBEAR, for Sint Maarten. Although the system upgrading should coincide with improvements made for the Kingdom partners, Sint Maarten never witnessed these and carried a feel of coming out last. We are last for upgrades, last for services, last for attention, if ever received. The frustration of employees could not continue to fall on deaf ears, and personnel called for change and improvement with the system. The other islands do not face the complex passenger streams as Sint Maarten, but due to geographic proximity to the current service provider, they have received continued improvement to their systems. Our unique knock-on effects of distance and desired throughput affects the BMS system performance. Radix, supported by automated border control system, is expedited processing of passengers, reducing the risk to passenger flow and passenger experience. This has a direct effect on country attractiveness, operational bottom lines, and resources utilization. The Radix software solution offers Sint Maarten two major advantages. One, full ownership and control over collected data with servers located on-site at designated border clearance points. No need to connect to a Curacao data center for processing transactions. And secondly, the ability to tailor a system to meet operational requirements. Radix is also deployed on Aruba and is in full operation for more than 30 years. On the rest of the Dutch Caribbean islands, the ACT-BMS is in use and the feelings are mixed. There is also currently an audit being done from the request of the YVO platform in the current BMS system that is being used. So there are several concerns that have been launched on the YVO platform about the BMS system that we have just stepped away from. Please elaborate on the procurement process and why the minister opted for this software. Is this software in collaboration with or can be linked to the existing software in the Dutch Caribbean, such as Curacao and Aruba? Can reports be shared with the aforementioned? Sint Maarten has entered into the purchase agreement with Gamma IT solely. Collaboration by way of information sharing with other territories within the kingdom is arranged by the way of mutual agreements related to immigrants. The current protocol strengthening border control, or the VGT, National Ordinance on Police Information. Therein, initiatives are introduced to ensure collaboration between territories, and this exists. Can reports be shared with the aforementioned? Yes, the ability to initiate this exists. I move on through you, Madam Chair Lady, to questions from MP Grisha Heilige-Martin. Border control system, where is this identified in the budget? What progress has been made in implementing the new border control system to provide better information and data intelligence on arrivals in Sint Maarten? How is such data currently being used? The first year of capital investments are designed to cover initial implementation expenses. The multi-annual operating budget will show how these expenses will be carried by the ministry strategically or structurally. What progress has been made in implementing the new border control system to provide better information and data intelligence on Sint Maarten? Currently, there is a server set up at the airport to handle transactions. Between March 26th and 27th of 2024, the project team from Radix will be on Sint Maarten to conduct a comprehensive assessment of implementation requirements across all border entry points. This evaluation will encompass law enforcement intelligence and administrative border processing outcomes. How is such data currently being used? The data that Radix currently collects remains part of IBPS domain and will be analyzed in order to better steer border supervision. Through you, Madam Chair Lady, I move on to questions from MP Roseberg. Why is there such a significant difference in the salary budgets between the Landsverordening, Police, Customs, and Coast Guard, especially considering the Landsverordening is the smallest organization? What justifies this disparity? The increases in salary posts throughout the ministry are attributed to multiple factors, namely, the overall increase in salary of 2% related to the proposed indexation of salaries in 2024, the placement of the personnel in the correct salary position in relation to the introduction of both the salary tables and function book, noting that Landsverordening, similar to the Border Control Division of Immigration and Border Control, shall be utilizing the police salary scale in connection with the changes introduced to their legal status regulation. Further, too, observation reveals that many personnel have been stagnated, unable to transition to the correct department, thereby affected by the accuracy of the budget they have been assigned to. Additionally, 4 vacancies are accounted for this department and is budgeted for in the 2024 budget. Noteworthy, a true development of budgets in relation to the personnel costs for the ministry will be better analyzed once the placement process, in particular phase 1, is completed. Regarding events like Justice Week and anti-counterfeit conferences, why is there a substantial budget allocation of $250,000? Can a specific breakdown be provided for each section? The budgeted expenses related to the expenses specifically linked to the travel of the YVO, which requires biannual attendance of the technical support staff along with the Minister of Justice. Expenses vary dependent on the hosting country. Further, the ministry has hosted the anti-counterfeit conference in close collaboration with the Customs Department for the last 2 years and budgeted for the 3rd annual event in 2024. However, this is subject to change based on the policy priorities of the incoming minister. The Justice Week is the annual focal point highlighting the personnel of justice through the various agencies as part of community awareness program. However, it is also a significant opportunity where employee recognition throughout the ministry is held. In addition, the minister invites the management team to an annual strategic planning and reflection workshop during this week. The budgeted expenses are estimated based on the realized cost over the past periods. I see various policies and funds for projects like combating human smuggling, undermining project, but what funds have been made available to address juvenile crime? For example, in connection to mental health and the different school fights. Is there a collaboration with the ECYS and VSR? Thank you for your question, MP Roseberg, through you, Madam Chair Lady, regarding the allocation of funds and inquiring on whether there are collaborative efforts in addressing juvenile crime, mental health issues, and school-related conflicts. I appreciate your concern and the opportunity to provide clarification on these matters. It is imperative to recognize that while the Ministry of Justice plays a crucial role in enforcing laws and maintaining order, the prevention and mitigation of social issues such as mental health concerns and juvenile delinquency requires a comprehensive approach involving various sectors of society. Justice serves as the tail end of the matter. Our primary responsibility is to enforce law and keep order. However, addressing the root causes of these issues lies at the front end, involving proactive measures aimed at providing proper support to families and institutions tasked with education and character development. Efforts to equip families and educational institutions with the necessary resources to nurture well-mannered, focused individuals who contribute positively to society are paramount. Programs aimed at promoting positive parenting and educational attainment plays a crucial role in this endeavor. The mental health matters, on the other hand, fall under the purview of the Ministry of VSR, while the police, KPSM, may assist in mental health foundation in dangerous situations. It is essential to avoid placing individuals in holding facilities within the justice system whenever possible. Regarding school-related conflicts, the police force of Sint Maarten has prioritized maintaining a presence in school districts to prevent acts of violence against students. However, it is evident that a more comprehensive approach is necessary to address the underlying issues contributing to such incidents. In conclusion, while the Ministry of Justice is committed to responding to incidents addressing juvenile crime and mental health challenges, require collaboration across sectors and proactive measures at the front end. Finding holistic solutions to these pressing social issues is a matter that needs to be prioritized, and it cannot just be one ministry pursuing it, but that all required stakeholders recognize the call and diligently work towards achieving a viable difference. Concerning Carnival, continuing questions from MP Roseberg. With Carnival approaching and the various activities organized by different promoters and considering the understaffed police force, how will the safety of our community be safeguarded? Today's newspaper is pretty clear. So my question is, given the recent incidents during the recent causeway jump-up, such as several stabbing and shooting, how will the safety of Carnival with the understaffed police and many events being ensured this year? Continues to ask, is it correct that that extra officers will be brought in from other islands? Also, if so, how many and for how long, specific dates? What is the cost related to this? Where on the budget can I find the budget allocated for this? The Staff Large-Scale Special Performance Team, or the SGBO, for Carnival has been initiated. This is a command structure specifically for events like Carnival. The SGBO consists of several units, each fulfilling its own expertise. Important units include a general commander, head of enforcement, head of intelligence, head of mobility, head of support, and head of communications. The general commander drafts a general plan with the BLUS included. The BLUS is explained as follows. This stands for Policy Principles Established by the Board, Location Influencing the Situation, Objects that may play a role during the event, Circumstances that may occur during the event, and subjects influencing the event. With the SGBO, an Information Risk and Scenario Management, or IRS, is developed. This outlines the most realistic events and scenarios in detail. Each unit creates a sub-plan in which the IRS for this specific unit is elaborated. The SGBO meets weekly to share information regarding the units and to coordinate and plan for each event. The General Commander collaborates with the organizers of the various events during the Carnival season. Event organizers are required to submit a safety plan emphasizing event security. Each event will undergo a risk analysis, and if a high risk of reputational damage is detected, the minister will be notified and guidance from KPSM will be given. Based on this, we will also make use of partners, such as the VKS. Next to this, overtime will be made to ensure safety and security. For each event, a plan is drafted and a schedule is created. The safety of our own personnel takes procedure. This is KPSM speaking. In this regard, assistance from VKS is required during the jump-ups. Next Friday, the Fete of Fitness Around Town jump-up will take place. KPSM will implement a zero-tolerance policy in collaboration with the Public Prosecutor's Office. Considering the course of events during the Causeway jump-up, a clear message will be conveyed. There will be significant police presence. KPSM will advise the minister to notify the route and implement a zero-tolerance policy based on the incidents. If the situation becomes uncontrollable, KPSM in the event will be halted in the interest of public safety. And I'm going to take this opportunity to reiterate what I had stated last year. I indicated to the public that there were a couple of things that we will not be tolerating for Carnival, and the same is this year. There will be no mask wearing, and I am giving KPSM full authority to shut the jam down in the event we have a repeat of what was experienced with the Causeway jump-up. Yeah? Reiterating that on this platform, and I'll be stating it on another platform pretty soon. Based on the analysis of the pre-Carnival activities, it will be an option for the Juve morning and the Grand Parade to request extra assistance from the police forces of the other islands. Since this year, there has been a close collaboration with colleagues from Friends Sint Maarten, and we extend our appreciation once again to our partners over there. Several police officers from KPSM have provided assistance during the carnival period on the front side. During the Heineken Regatta, the gendarmerie provided assistance to KPSM. The intention is to continue this form of collaboration during the carnival period, at least in providing assistance during Juve morning. Special dates to keep in mind is the 27th of April, which is Juve morning, the 30th of April, Grand Carnival Parade, and the 1st of May, Grand Carnival Parade, second day. KPSM plans to seek approval from my person as Minister of Justice to acquire additional support police officers. A recommendation will be prepared for the Minister outlining KPSM's request for assistance from the Leeward Islands, comprising of at least 20 personnel. I make note that this assistance will be necessary from April 26 to May 2nd. The cost amounts to approximately 1,500 guilders per person per day. KPSM always prepares a cost estimate for events with the needed budget posts related to this. Noteworthy is that each year costs are attributed to the carnival event and debited with the budget of KPSM operational expenses. It is also important to note that these expenses are related to their stay and travel and does not or is not considered a temporary employment expense. Continuing with questions from MP Roseberg. What budget is allocated for the training of the customs and immigration workers? I am not seeing that on the budget. While the police force, prison, and Landsverordening, there is a budget for training. Why is that? The increase in the budget post 43480 under the 5021 Staff Bureau to 1.5 million is related to the ministry-wide objective to address the training needs of various departments to be managed centrally under the HR Justice Division of the Ministry of Justice. The training plan ministry-wide is currently being developed by the HR department in conjunction with a signed MOU with the ORV Institute in Curacao. More details pertaining to this pipeline initiative will be shared in the very near future. What are the expenses related to the AVO and why has the allocation increased to over 204,000? There has been a rise in the material expenditure within 5101 Department of Judicial Affairs, primarily attributed to the increase in budget post 43489 AVO-related expenses. This increase is due to an outstanding invoice stemming from a commitment made in 2014-2015 regarding the Sint Maarten's contribution costs related to the Judicial Laws Evaluation Commission, which had not been settled previously. Why has the budget for victim support services increased from 400 to 450,000? 150,000 more than last year, especially since it hasn't started yet. What justifies this increase? In 2021, the Ministry of Justice founded the Victim Support Services Foundation. The foundation aims to aid individuals directly or indirectly impacted by traumatic experiences or specific offenses. The subsidy support of 2023 was budgeted at 300,000 guilders, which is a limited amount, not reflective of the full year's operational expenses. Although the initial aim was to establish the operations of VSS immediately after its incorporation in 2021, there was some challenges. Nonetheless, with their budget now allocated and being utilized, Director Cassandra Richardson and the board are actively preparing the opening of their doors to serve the public and contribute to the justice chain in just a few short weeks. Due to the challenges to provide the foundation with office space, the government has granted the foundation the permission to include the provision of rental space within their budget. To accommodate for the cost anticipated over the 2024 period and the inclusion of office space, an increased budget allocation was made available. As VSS becomes fully operational, a future increased budget is anticipated in 2025 to meet the necessary subsidy support. Why hasn't a budget been allocated for the Youth Detention Center? The Youth Detention Center, or the Miss Lally Center, is not a standalone entity. It falls under the executing department of Harvey Bay or the Prison and House of Detention. As such, the budgeted costs related to MLC, both personnel and material expenses, are captured under the overall budget of Harvey Bay, which is 5202. What funds are allocated for upgrading the police station, particularly to address issues like mold? The Chief of Police and I have engaged in discussions regarding the possibility of constructing a new facility. This conversation arose following consideration to involve inmates in a project to paint the exterior of the existing building. This collaborative initiative between the Justice and VROMI departments aimed to reestablish the inmate work program at Harvey Bay. However, VROMI's assessment of the building suggested that there may be too many structural issues prompting consideration for the construction of a new facility. Chief John has been tasked with exploring the design logistics required to initiate a tender process for the new facility. Additionally, the ministry plans to conduct an assessment of the department's needs in 2024, with further consideration in the budget of 2025. It is worth noting that the department has ensured regular mold testing, most recently conducted at the beginning of 2024. Where is the budget? Can I find a budgeted amount for rehabilitation and resocialization efforts? The prison management has been dedicated to enhancing and expanding the daytime activities offered within the prison. Presently, the following courses are available: GED education covering math, language, science, and social studies with a strong emphasis on improving literacy skills. This program is open to all inmates expressing interest, including those at MLC. Currently, 18 male inmates and 1 female inmate are participating at Harvey Bay Point Blanche, with a total of 8 participants at MLC. A proposal has been submitted by a local institution to introduce an entrepreneurial course for inmates, recognizing that not all inmates aspire to own a business. This proposal also aims to teach participants how to be valuable employees, focusing on maintaining gainful employment. However, this course is still pending establishment, as an official survey of interested parties is required to ensure that government's investment is utilized effectively by the inmates. In collaboration with SCAIS, we have also recently started the following courses: anger management, cognitive behavioral courses, social skills, and domestic violence awareness. The inmates are able to partake in classes and have jobs such as sewing classes, music lessons. The prison has a band. They're called a New Energy Band. Assist in the preparing of meals in the kitchen, prisoner maintenance team, assist in the library or the canteen, duties as cleaners, and in the laundry room. We are currently in discussion with multiple organizations and persons to organize the following classes: mediation services, entrepreneurial courses, and agricultural or hydroponics classes. The above-mentioned classes are also made available for the female and youth inmates. We will be looking into providing more vocational classes such as culinary courses, beautician courses, and more in collaboration with service providers. The new prison will include a total of 4 workshops, 2 classrooms that will be outfitted for the intended purpose, such as carpentry, upholstery, and bakery, and more. Moving on through you, Madam Chair Lady, to questions from MP Emmanuel. When you are fined here on Sint Maarten, where does that money go? Is it not going into the general coffers of government? The OM spoke about a bank account in Orco Bank that fines are deposited. Who has access to that account? How much is on the account? Breakdown over the last 4 years. On the screen, you'll also see that a flyer was recently published by the OM's office that gives a breakdown and step-by-step. But money is deposited to the crime fund account at the Banco de Caribe Bank. Please see attached flyer posted on the Government of Sint Maarten's Facebook page, also advertised by the OM, as this is meant as an awareness campaign to simplify the collection of fines. The account now has 8.4 million, including subsidy received from the Netherlands. Please refer to the breakdown provided for analysis of 2024 and 2023. Now, it says to refer to it, but in actuality, MP, through you, Madam Chair Lady, we will be booking in this breakdown so that the members of Parliament would be able to peruse said document, okay? Also, break down the crime fund, what it was spent on, and how much is there now, and who has access to it. Again, the breakdown that we will provide will give a thorough overview as to the questions that MP Emmanuel is asking. The finance team within the Ministry of Justice, the Secretary General, are tasked with the management of the Crime Fund under the authority of the Ministry of Justice in accordance with the governing legislation. Robbie DeSanto had a case, Biento case. He was to pay a fine of substantial amount in the millions. The case was here, but the monies were paid to a bank in Curacao. What was St. Martin's share from that fine that was given and the bank account that was given to deposit the money in Curacao? What was the account? Was anything deposited on the crime fund here in St. Martin? What was the percentage? The funds deposited in relation to the case de Santo were deposited to the crime fund account at the Banco de Caribe. The total percentage is unknown at this time. However, the amount that was deposited was 3.4 million, and this was deposited in December of 2022. I am sharing here the law that governs the crime fund. Okay, it contains 7 articles that regulate how and for what the money in the crime fund can be used for, such as projects to combat crime, provisions made by pursuant to the Accountability National Ordinance regarding the budget, and account applies to the management of the funds. The income of the funds is the proceeds from the sale of confiscated and withdrawn objects, money that has been confiscated because it was obtained as a result of criminal offenses, the proceeds from asset sharing, the proceeds from the collection of fines, a contribution from the country to the extent that there is a need for it, and a contribution for private individuals. The funds are managed by the Minister of Justice under the supervision of daily management is delegated to the head of the Judicial Affairs Department. Every year, the minister has to submit a policy plan when submitting the budget indicating the projects that are eligible for financing from the funds in the budget year. The expenses of the funds are costs of the preparation and implementation of projects indicated in the policy plan. And for that, it has to be understood that it is essential to emphasize that the crime fund is merely not a piggy bank, but rather a dedicated fund aimed to financial projects designed to combat crime. Further, the improvements on the management of the crime fund and legislation is in the country package objectives, and these improvements are underway. I move on through you, Madam Chair Lady, to questions from MP La Cruz. Excuse me 1 second. How much has it cost the country in court cases over the last 4 years? And what is the plan to reduce these costs? Considering the diverse range of court cases that the Ministry of Justice handles, including those involving staff, citizens, immigration matters, and numerous other scenarios, it will take time to gather and compile this information. Therefore, Madam Chair Lady, through you, I kindly request that the requested response be allowed to be presented in writing. What projects or plans do you urge the incoming government to maintain as it has been in the works over the last 4 years? Thank you for this question, MP La Cruz. I urge the incoming government to acknowledge the critical importance of maintaining the HR products within the Ministry of Justice. It's crucial to understand that the Ministry of Justice is distinct from administrative ministries. Its operations are unique and must be preserved accordingly. Despite the challenges, significant progress has been made, and presently, the implementation of proper personnel decrees, national decrees, starting with phase 1 is underway after many years. We also have projects like the new prison, victim support services being maintained, the anti-counterfeit conference, Justice Week, and I am going to be elaborating on these in the coming week a little bit more, about our achievements and why it's important to recognize the reservations of budgets to maintain these. We also look at the delivery of legislative packages for introducing an advanced passenger information and passenger name record system, which is APIS. This is a legislation that is going to be coming to Parliament. Delivery of legislative packages for the use of biometric data to process travelers, delivery of a legislation package to charge a compensation fee for screening travelers from and to our shores, the introduction of the first national targeting center within the region, This center will work alongside global partners to better protect the Caribbean basin. Acquisition of the ASICUDA system and any relevant legislation package for heightening cargo screening of unwanted goods. Establishment of the National Reporting Center charging the fight against human smuggling, human trafficking, and labor exploitation. Revisiting and update to the audit entertainment policy or the prostitution policy? Adult entertainment. Animations. Establishment of a government task force and coordinating office for the administrative approach to combating subversive crime, fulfilling the merger of IBPS customs to improve effectiveness and resources towards border coordination and steering. And through you, Madam Chair Lady, I move on to questions posed by your person, Ms. Westcott Williams. Amount of 1.5 million of courses and training, can that be specified in terms of which courses and agencies this amount is for? The increase in the budget post 434880 under 5021 Staff Bureau is the 1.5 million I mentioned earlier, where the Staff Bureau currently has a plan, and we will be sharing details of that plan within short. This is a similar question that I had received earlier, and I had given those details, but the presentation has it. The budgeted amount for the Anti-Counterfeit Conference and Human Trafficking Conference, they were also in 2023. It is stated that they were held in 2023 and will be held in 2024, or were they held in both 2023 and 2024 or not? Well, yes, so we had two successful anti-counterfeit conferences for the last 2 years, and there is reservations to continue it. But of course, the third annual event is contingent on the priority of the incoming minister if he or she wishes to continue with same. I hope they will, because it is imperative for us to recognize the importance of our consumers being able to ensure that when they spend their money, they're spending their money for authentic product. And that's just not speaking about clothing. We're talking about pharmaceuticals, perfume, cigarettes, liquor. We're also talking about the sale of refurbished appliances on the island. We have a lot of that also happening, and the Customs Department is the department that is required to protect our consumers in that capacity. So I believe it behooves our Minister of Justice incoming and the government as well to recognize the importance of our counterfeit conference and keep it going. The Justice Week is the annual focal point highlighting personnel of the justice through various agencies. I mentioned about this earlier, but I'll go a little further. Upon coming into office, Madam Chair Lady, one of the things that I heard a lot from the justice employees is that they felt very undervalued, and they felt as though past management and administrations didn't recognize how important they are for our community and the risk that they put their lives up for us on a daily basis. And it is for that reason that I utilize the Justice Week to host, in particular, the Justice Award and Recognition Ball, because that is the evening when we recognize our staff and we give them awards and we highlight the hard work that they do, and we make them realize that they are appreciated. It is the focal point and the reasoning why I prioritize them throughout my tenure, and I'm happy for all that we have achieved. So again, this is also budgeted for the incoming minister to carry on this tradition of recognizing the staff within the Justice Week. What is the explanation for a more than 4 million increase of the operational costs under the Staff Bureau for the Ministry of Justice? What is the buildup of these accounts? So, Madam Chair Lady, you so indicated I would not have to go through specific charts that are provided, and the members of Parliament does have it. The viewing public can see it, but I will say that the projects under the ORV Hey 2.0 is subsidized via the Netherlands. So this is a project for border management and control. It is subsidized, and this is 2.0, which is indeed a continuation of an existing project that I came in and met. We completed the first one, and due to its success and the fact that it is still needed and warranted, a 2.0 version was created, and as I stated, it is subsidized by the Netherlands. Further, the centralized management of training budget. The key focus of this project is to combat human trafficking and undermining. These two components account to over 60% of this budget. Can a global multi-annual calculation of the retroactive payment for the justice workers tied into the budget be provided? The one-off costs for the retroactive payment of the civil servants, both active and inactive as a result of the retroactive enforcement of the function book and salary tables, to the 10th of October 2010 up to the end of 2023 are estimated at 44.5 million guilders. Based on the estimated impact of the 2024 and the disbursement plan, the budget allocation of the 4 to 6 million is to accommodate the placement phases is anticipated. On the screen, you'll be able to see the 2024 budget has a total of 5.1 million to account for the retroactive payments for justice personnel. Moving on to your other question, Madam Chair Lady. Need overview of justice agencies that are shared responsibilities within the Dutch Kingdom. There are several of them where we pay a part of the cost and other countries in the Dutch Kingdom also pays. Can we get an overview of the total cost and Sint Maarten's share of the cost? Example, customs. Here on screen, you can see a breakdown of the OM, or the Parket van Justitie, Parket Procureur-Generaal, so the Attorney General. You have the Hof van Justitie, the Raad van Rechtshandhaving, SBeer, Kustwacht. We don't particularly have douane here, which you mentioned, but we can definitely get you that information. Any recent reports of the courts of guardianship, and specifically regarding findings and maintaining foster homes and foster parents? Can it be confirmed or dismissed that it is very difficult to find foster parents and foster homes, and that the amounts paid to foster parents are hardly enough to take care of the children? Would like the minister's take and views on this. There are no recent reports from the Court of Guardianship regarding finding and maintaining foster homes and foster families. However, last year a work group was formed with representatives from the Ministry of Justice, VSA, and Youth to review legislations and guidelines on the minimum standards for foster care, alternative care, as these documents were drafted in 2011. The Court of Guardianship, with the technical support of UNICEF, reviewed the documents in 2022 and provided feedback. These updated legislations and guidelines have been presented to the to our Judicial Affairs Department for further input. However, in discussions with colleague ministers, it became evident that further discussions need to be held with regards to the roles and responsibilities as it pertains to minimum standards and inspection of homes. The increase of foster care allowance is part of the discussion. I can confirm that the current allowance is only 225 guilders per month for a foster parent and 500 per month for placement in foster homes or residential facilities. In addition to the allowance, the department issues guarantee letters for medical care and dental once the child is not insured. Depending on the situation, the department also covers the costs for school contribution, uniforms, or unforeseen expenses on the child in this care of the state. It is important to note that the current amounts allocated are insufficient to cover the expenses associated with raising a child, especially a child with special needs. Many individuals have shown interest in fostering but are discouraged by the inadequate allowance in comparison to the actual cost of care. In light of this, I have obtained a draft legislation from the Best Islands where a more realistic monthly allowance for foster parents has been recently established. The allowance accurately reflects the cost of clothing, education, medical coverage for the child, and more. The Department of Judicial Affairs of the Ministry of Justice has been tasked with developing a similar legislation for St. Maarten. I urge the incoming minister to prioritize the completion of this legislation. Turning point. What is their budget based on? Is it their request? What have they requested compared to what they will get? And is there any solution in the budget for Turning Point to deal with the long list to be admitted there? The budgeted amount for Turning Point Foundation is based on subsidy request for 2024 to the Ministry of Justice. Turning Point has indicated that the trends that affect the increase in demand, a general heightened sense of anxiety in society as a whole, problems that have arisen during COVID-19 that have not been resolved, such as loss of employment, loss of housing, increase in cost of living, unemployment for students returning to St. Maarten after obtaining college degrees, violence in schools causing insecurities and fear among students, broken homes is a paramount factor, and this has greatly increased since COVID-19. Loss in society, in the reality of God or a higher power, stronger drugs that cause mental illnesses. Suggestions to curb the drive in demand, prevention campaigns with a budget with ECYS, mandatory parenting awareness program, parental consequences program for students with risky behaviors, paid version of the DARE program reintroduced in the schools, prevention campaign in the faith communities and community councils. Turning Point has indicated a need to expand but require expansion land and further financial commitment within the scope of ECYS. Turning Point has specified that each additional campus would necessitate duplicating the Turning Point current budget. To replicate the facility, one additional campus, the estimated cost could be approximately $1,055,000. How should we read that under the Youth Detention Center, MLC, that there is no amount? I also covered that the MLC does not stand alone. It is a facility that falls under the Harvey Bay or the Princeton House of Detention. And so the budget line of 5202 includes the budget necessary to carry MLC. Is the insurance for justice workers now regulated? Is it in place with no further issues? The formal approval on the handling of this matter is in the council, The formal approval on the handling of this matter in the Council of Ministers has been handled. The needed national decree is to be ratified by His Excellency, after which the formalization of the new agreement and coverage shall be formalized. However, it must be noted that the current coverage as established in the Rechtspositie Politie under Chapter 10 liability coverage is in effect. As such, the employees under the Division of Border Control, Police, and Landsverordening, to whom this regulation applies and holds frontline positions as defined in the regulation, are covered. The further establishment of the coverage with the third-party insurance extends to coverage to departments not under the regulation and holds frontline functions. Once the national decree is ratified, the formalization of the agreement with the third-party insurance company can be completed. Reduction in VKS subsidy for 250,000 guilders to 650,000 guilders. What was the reduction based on? The reduction of the VKS budgeted expenses is linked directly to an increase in the budget vacancies for the recruitment of 10 FTAs for security at Harvey Bay. This is directly linked to the establishment of the function book and therein established FTAs for security. This recruitment plan is aimed at commencing in quarter 2 or 3 of 2024. Madam Chair Lady, I've actually come to the end of my answers to the members of Parliament. Thank you. I remain available for any questions that may follow.
Minister of Justice, Minister Richardson, thank you. Thank you for going through the answers as provided. And we have a few members of parliament who wish to react to something you said or maybe ask something to be clarified. And I give the floor to MP Roosburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, for your for the answers, and I also would like to thank you for the presentation. This is the only minister that provided a presentation today. I always like to see that, and then you can read, and it's better. So thank you for that. I have additional questions. In your letter, to you, Madam Chair, in your letter dated March 18th, to the justice workers, so March 18, 2024, you mentioned updates on the national decrees. Can you clarify if other justice departments are assisting in the current process? Because I can remember that it was stated to speed up the process, that would be the case, considering the fact that in that letter it was mentioned that at that moment, 44 LBs has been signed, and a minimum of 25 per week. So is there addition to the team of working on those LBs? And has it been considered, seeing that there are over 700 LBs to be signed, to hire external company? Has it been thought about to do that, and has it also been budgeted to speed up the process? And if so, where can I find that in the budget? And if it has not been done, what's the reason that it hasn't been budgeted for? If there is no appeal filed against the national decree, what is the expected time frame? Because that's the current question that everybody would like to know for the first payment for the employees. Because I saw in that same letter that it was mentioned promptly, but that's quite vague. So could a specific time frame, so I mean from signing, be given? Will it be a week? Will it be 2 weeks? Will it be a month? So that is clear to the community and especially the justice workers. Then my other question is, through you, Madam Chair, could I receive the SOAB report on the crime fund? It should cover the 6 months when the SOAB was tasked in 2022 with the restructuring of the crime fund. Because a year and a half after SOLB's work should have been completed in connection to the crime fund, I would like to know if the crime fund has an independent management, or is it the financial team within the Ministry of Justice and the Secretary General? So I can remember reading that it had to be an independent management. So is that the case at this moment? And if so, who is this management? The names. Which independent organization, that's an additional question, monitors the crime fund? That also, I can remember, was needed. And can I also find that somewhere in the budget, if so? And which prevention projects have been funded by the crime fund and are currently funded? So I would like a list of that, if that has happened. And those are my questions for now. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roosburg. And I now give the floor to MP La Cruz. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and a good evening to you, Minister Richardson, and your support staff. I'd like to echo those sentiments that were mentioned before. This was the most pleasant presentation through the whole budget debate, in my opinion. It was clear and elaborate. So my only question was concerning my first question. I didn't get a time when you will be able to come back with the answer to that. But otherwise to that, job well done.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I now give the floor to MP Mingret.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Your Honorable Minister and your support staff. I have to say you have informed my questions sufficiently, but for clarification, I just want to add another question. Is there anything being done within the ministry to protect those persons born and raised in St. Maarten to non-national parents? That's just another question I wanted to add. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Mingret. Minister, I just would like to react to an answer given to a question of mine, and that has to do with the Miss Lally Center and the request why it does not appear as a line item in the budget. And the answer was because it's considered part of the Huis van Bewaring. And I would want to give the ministry into consideration to still have the budget for the youth facility, for the Miss Lally Center, separate, where it is clear what the cost is in terms of salary and operational cost. I just want to give that based on the answer given. I think it's important to be able to see that within the budget. So I just wanted to add that, and I too want to thank you for your presentation, and I will now allow you to respond to the questions that have been asked, the few questions that have been asked.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady, and to the responses or feedback we've received thus far from the members. I would like to ask Madam Chair Lady if it's possible to answer some of these questions, but in particular, many that have been, or a few that have been asked by MP Roseberg, we're going to need to put those in writing. But there are some that I can answer now, as well as, I believe, from the other two MPs. So the reference is made to the letter that I sent out to the employees, and that letter was prepared and sent out to employees because through media, through the intranet, through general staff meeting, through meetings with our unions, even here in Parliament, we have given time and time again thorough breakdown as to the phases of this entire personnel project. But yet we did receive responses from, let's say, some recipients of the individual LBAs that they didn't quite understand why the LBA they have received didn't have all of the information that they thought it should have. And so that's the reason that, and in consultation with the unions that we met with, it was suggested that we go ahead and put it in writing again and send it through to the staff so that each staff gets it, as well as going forward when we're issuing those national decrees, we're going to be giving staff that letter as well in attachment. Can you clarify if additional members will be joining the team? One additional member is going to be joining the team, and that member is going to specifically be giving Ms. Saskia Thomas-Solomon, who's sitting here next to me, the support when it comes to the validation of the information. And the validation of the information is an aspect that is very sensitive. Not any and every one can be touching into it. These are person's very personal information, their data, and in the event that this information gets, I don't want to use the word contaminated, but what's the right word to use? Tampered with in the wrong way, this can throw off the entire, even the auditing that SORB still has to do to ensure that this was done correctly. It could jeopardize the entire project. So whilst I recognize that there is this need to, really push this along, I think the rhythm has been going very well. As indicated, we have a batch that we expect to get back pretty soon from the cabinet of the governor. We have a batch that is getting finalized to go on to the Ministry of Finance. Then we have Ms. Candia Joseph, who has her own consultancy known as SAGE. She has agreed to come on board to give Saskia that support in the validation, because that is where the meticulous process is. So again, whilst we recognize the wish to have this expedited, we have to really protect the information, because we do not want, we want to keep the number of court cases down. MP La Cruz is asking about that. So to avoid it, we're trying to really manage this thing properly. Then it's the question, the team is supported by other departments. Well, we did have and still do have some persons from KPSM. KPSM is one of the few departments within the ministry that does have HR personnel and persons who understand the requirements to handling personal data of staff. We have had their support and it continues. Will you hire external companies to assist? If it is a case that Saskia and Ms. Joseph recognize that there is capable entities within that is able to be trustworthy and can handle this, we don't have any objections to that. Did we make reservations for it? No, we did not, but I'm sure that if push comes to shove, we would have to make a sacrifice somewhere. We will do so. If there is no appeal file, what is the timeline for payment? The next payday. Payroll. So there are staff who receive their LBAs and they can expect to see the difference in their salaries at this month end, as well as remember that some of them are going to be getting a retroactive payment calculated back to January 2023, because the objective of this first LBA was to stop the bleed. And that is something that a lot of persons don't seem to understand as well. Had we started from where you left off, it means that the days and the months of the outstanding that the government owes will continue, and we had to end that. Yeah? So hence the reason for this first LBA. Can I receive a SORB report of the crime fund? I don't believe there's an objection to that, but we will verify, because this is linked to the country package, right? Lands packet. Which project funded by the crime fund? You would be able to see that in the document that I indicated to MP Emmanuel, through you, Madam Chair Lady. I made mention of the fact that we will be docking in this reference report, and that report will be able to give you thorough review and transparency where the crime fund's expenditures are concerned. Time frame on what? Mr. La Cruz? The time frame would be on Q1. Oh, okay. Oh, so like when you will be able to get, so we will have to, we'll have a conversation with our judicial department to find out how they can compile this information for you. Mr. Mingret, you were asking about a project on, well, we don't particularly have a project per se, but what we do is promote for these children to put in the application. We have the humanitarian platform, but we also have the opportunity for persons to apply. I don't know if it is a case that, persons are seeking a Brooks Tower type of approach, but that is not what we are going to intend to do, because within the Brooks Tower in itself, there were a lot of challenges, yes? But individuals that are born on Sint Maarten, the law states when you turn 18, you have a right to apply for your residency, your Dutch residency. And one of the things that I'd like to say is, because I know you sent me a letter in particular with regards to persons with Haitian background, born to nationals. But the reality of the matter is I had a meeting with the community for Haitian nationals, and one of the things I ask is about getting the ability to educate persons a little bit more. That is the role that I think that the community council needs to play when it comes to the nationals, be it any nationality. We have a lot of community councils. Learn the laws and support them, because sometimes even the language is a barrier. But there's a lot of onus being thrown on government to do the work, when as an external party, you can give more support to persons as to how to follow the law and apply. And that's as simple as it is. Yeah? Madam Chair Lady, I hope that I've answered everybody's questions. No, there's another one. MLC, your suggestion is taken into account to make that adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for the answers provided, including your answer regarding the MLC, and members of parliament, I don't see anyone else requesting any further clarification. The minister has indicated, like several of her colleagues have done, that there is some documentation. This documentation, Minister, should form part of your written answers. So when we're getting the answers for the report, that the documentation that you indicated will be sent, that can be sent along with it to make it part of the package of the legislative trajectory that we're in. So I would now like to thank the entire Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, the Minister representing the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Justice, the last one here with us this evening, Minister of Education, Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunication, and their entire support staff for your presence in person and online and for providing the necessary information. Members of Parliament, if there are no further questions or comments at this time, we can then prepare the final report to be sent to the government on this draft national ordinance. As you could have observed, both our secretariat as well as the secretariat of the Council of Ministers have been working already on the written questions as well as the written answers in order to get our report finalized. So if there are no further questions or comments, we are going to formalize this report to be sent to the government, and you will be informed when the public meeting on the budget 2024 will commence. So, ladies and gentlemen, everyone here tonight, those still with us on the outside, we have come to the end of this Central Committee meeting. I thank you for your participation, and I hereby close this Central Committee meeting, wishing you all a very good night.